Welcome to the OIS podcast. Today, Dr. Rob Rothman chats with an international leader in ophthalmology, Adrienne Graves. As you'll learn, an early fascination with the eye motivated her to study visual science, and that passion has taken her to the top of some of the leading eye care companies in the world. Take it away, Rob.
Hello, OIS podcast audience. Nice to be speaking with you again today. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Rob Rothman. I am a practicing ophthalmologist, a glaucoma specialist by training, and I spend about half of my time in clinical practice taking care of patients. The other half of my time I spend running Infocus Capital Partners, which is an ophthalmic venture capital fund. And today we have Adrienne Graves, who is arguably one of the most influential women in ophthalmology today. So welcome, Adrienne. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your incredible schedule to speak with us. And I'm looking forward to getting in deep with some of the things that you've done in your life and exposing the audience to all the amazing stuff that's going on in ophthalmology in your world. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Rob. It's always a total delight to talk to you. So let's have some fun here.
We should probably start by letting people know, where you came from, sort of where you grew up, what your education was, childhood, things like that. So people can sort of hear about how somebody becomes you and where you start from.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in Seattle. My father was a Presbyterian minister. I should say that I was always really interested in math and science. And I never had the intimidation factor. I never really felt that was not for girls. And it was actually quite the opposite. And I think I told this story on the OIS stage actually a few years ago, but I just always assumed that girls were better at math and science than boys were, because I used to tutor the football teams, the basketball teams, all my guy friends. And so I just, to me, girls were just better at that. And so that was always a fascination for me. And actually, ophthalmology, as you said, has been, my entire career. And it actually started as an interest very, very early in childhood. I thought that vision was like the coolest magic trick in the world. You close your eyes, everything goes black. You open them up and everything just appears instantly again. And I used to ask people, how does that happen? Is that the coolest? And so no one could really tell me. As soon as I could study it, which was in college, I did. And I just never stopped. It's been a lifetime passion.
So educationally, what did you do in college and as a postdoc that sort of built your interest in this space and more formally? It's a little bit different. You found that fascination, from the visual process itself. When you're a Jewish guy from Long Island, it's your mother says you're going to go be a doctor, and then you pick something, and some guys end up being ophthalmologists. That's the difference between how we do it and how you did it. Yours is obviously a lot more pure, but there must have been something that happened along the way that sort of formalized you onto the path of being able to run companies and direct companies at the level that you do.
Well, in college, I was really interested in psychology and biology and neuroscience. And I was lucky enough to have courses in visual science and neurophysiology, the courses that I had craved since I was a kid. And I did a senior honors thesis in visual science. I did a visual psychophysics project, hung out with graduate students, and I was totally hooked. I had earlier thought about going to graduate school in clinical psychology, but I changed my mind. And actually, a lot of people said to me, well, you're so interested in science, why don't you go to medical school? You can make a lot more money as a physician than a scientist. And I thought, and my parents didn't push me that way, though. My parents just were thrilled that I found something I was passionate about. And I I didn't want to go to medical school because I wanted to continue in vision research. I wanted to just go, straight on into the lab. That's what I did.
So that's what you did. So you did postdoctorate work in visual science. Is that really what started you off the path?
Yeah, I did. Right after college, I actually spent a year at Harvard Medical School and Children's Hospital, working for Ann Fulton, who's a pediatric ophthalmologist and retina specialist. And she had just arrived there. I helped her set up her lab, an electrophysiology lab, a retinal electrophysiology lab. She also taught me to do clinical ERGs. So I was her clinical ERG tech as well. I couldn't believe that she trusted me to do that. I learned so much. But that was when I started really having a passion to be involved in looking at new therapies, particularly in retina. There was really nothing at that point. I was doing ERGs on kids with family histories of inherited retinal disorders. And I would just pray every time I did their ERGs that there would be a normal signal, because there was, at that time, this was in the late 70s, there was nothing really on the horizon even to treat those precious children.
So you had an interest, you saw a need, and then, and I'm asking you these questions just so you know, because I think that it's important for people who may listen to this who want to, think about a pathway. How does that translate into, a paying gig? What's your first job out of that? How do you transition from that world inside the laboratory out into the world, outside the laboratory, where clinical things are happening?
Yeah, it was really an interesting path because so I did do a PhD in visual neuroscience, went on and did a postdoc in Paris, which was pretty wonderful, in visual neuroscience. And I was there I was starting my third year as a postdoc. Because Paris. So at the beginning of my
take your time, right?
and I was having a blast. I was learning some new technologies. I was learning single unit recording, and I was teaching some of the techniques that I knew to the rest of the lab. It was really, really a fun experience. And I got a call though from a headhunter essentially for Alcon. And they wanted to hire someone to set up a visual function lab, essentially a retinal electrophysiology lab. And I didn't know anything about the pharmaceutical business at all. I knew nothing. And, they said, okay, it's in Fort Worth, Texas. At first I just, I thought that sounds kind of crazy, but then I thought, well, why not explore it? What the heck? And I went on the interview, and I was amazed, actually. Well, I mean, when you come from academia and then you go to Alcon's lab facilities, and it's like paradise for a scientist. And, I started to think, well, my gosh, they wanted to give me a budget, which seemed, huge to me at the time. It actually was a huge budget to set up an amazing lab. And so I did, I ended up taking the job and, moving from Paris to Fort Worth, Texas, starting in industry, which I knew, pretty much nothing about and had never thought about. Turned out to be the best decision of my life.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I mean, it seems easy though. Paris, Fort Worth. I mean, that's an easy choice.
Paris, Fort Worth.
Paris, Fort Worth. What's the difference?
Well, back then, I used to have to tell people that I met in Fort Worth, when they asked where I was moving from, I had to actually say Paris, France.
France, right. Paris, Texas.
Because I just said Paris a few times and people were like, because there is a Paris, Texas.
Paris, Texas, yes, there is.
And people would say like, oh, so you're moving up to the big city, eh? But Alcon was just an amazing experience for me because when my very first boss called me in on my first day of work and said, Adrienne, I just want to tell you right now, there are so many opportunities for you at Alcon. And he said, I'm going to introduce you to people and I'm going to be happy no matter where you end up in the company. There are opportunities for you. So don't think that, this lab is all you can do. There are so many opportunities for you. And at the time I thought, I knew he was being wonderful because he was, but I thought, all I care about right now is I'm going to build the best darn retinal electrophysiology lab that there ever could be. But in fact, I did go on. He did introduce me to not only the CEO, the sales, marketing people. They took me on trips all over the world just to have me talk about visual function and how it related to the different drugs that we were developing. So it was just an amazing training ground and a wonderful experience.
So, we could probably go through every single step along the way, but let me jump forward a little bit. So, you ultimately, and it doesn't really matter what the time frame is, but from there, you achieved some pretty unbelievable success in the world of ophthalmology. So, and just for the audience, you might want to just look up Adrienne's, bio somewhere out there on the web, but she has been the CEO of Santen, and was at Santen for many years. I think it was 15 years. So you were CEO and then you were, I think, clinical development VP, right? So worldwide development VP.
Yeah, I started out in R&D and clinical development and did the worldwide group in clinical and then was asked to be CEO. So I was there 15 years.
15 years, right. And then you for I think it was 8 or 9 years, I think you mentioned at Alcon before that, right? So
correct.
So and moving up through the ranks there. So these are two of the biggest companies in ophthalmology, pharmaceuticals. And Adrienne's been at the top of the executive chain at both of those. So that in and of itself is pretty fascinating. But then you start to mix into it, all the board positions, right? So, board director of Iberic, which you're going to spend some time talking about. I think there's some stuff that we should probably discuss about that company. But Nycox and Oxeron and Theraptics, and companies that have been acquired by other ophthalmic companies like Envisia and Encore that we talked about, that have been acquired by other companies. Airpio, these are some of the, up and coming and developmental companies inside the ophthalmology space. So some of the ones that have become public companies that were originally startups. So you've been involved in these companies at every level, both from board directorship all the way through operational roles. At the same time, having taken on philanthropic responsibilities as well. So the ophthalmic world leaders, right, and Glaucoma 360. So two entities that you'll explain, who's sort of who they are and what they do, but also foundational positions at Foundation Fighting Blindness, at the American Academy of Ophthalmology. You've ended up serving in all of these different roles inside of ophthalmology, and it really started with a job at Alcon, right? So it started with a job, and it's become all of these things, and that's why when you think about all the people who have been involved in so many aspects of ophthalmology, your name comes up. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or whatever. You've been at the forefront of the both the developmental and the business side of ophthalmology for many years. So I think that you probably should sort of tell people how this sort of goes, and how you find the time or how you navigate your responsibilities or how you think about your responsibility to patients and to ophthalmology through your work, because I think that's a big question, right? People go down a business path very often and succeed, but then some people also find the time to do other things there that are also beneficial, like board directorships and the foundational work. So just maybe pontificate off, that for us.
For sure. Well, I feel really fortunate because ophthalmology has been my passion for a long time, and it continues to be my passion. And I think there have been so many advances in, we talked about retina, but advances in all parts of ophthalmology, the technologies for studying the pathophysiology of disorders, and then therapeutics that come out of those studies. It just keeps marching along, and some of the things, gene therapies, seemed like would have been science fiction way back when. So there have been so many advances in ophthalmology, and that's what really keeps me passionate. It's my career. I've loved my career, and it's been, so much more than just a way of making a living. It is, I still find it so fascinating, find the science fascinating. I find the people fascinating, so many lifelong friends in ophthalmology, and people who were kind to me when I was first learning ophthalmology, and who have become, lifelong friends. It's a world that continues to excite me. And when I was at Santen and became CEO, obviously that was an incredible learning experience as well. I was on one outside board when I was CEO of Santen, and I realized that I loved being on the board, partly because you're with a group of people from varied backgrounds that all sort of contribute strategically to the growth of a company, and I love that. And I thought, well, that's something that would be really cool for the next stage of my career. And again, I've been really fortunate in how that's turned out. As you said, I'm on a number of different boards. Public boards, private boards, in pretty much every aspect of ophthalmology, retina companies, glaucoma companies, external disease companies. And so it's really cool because I'm involved in so many different aspects of ophthalmology and advances in ophthalmology. And for me, it's sort of the perfect situation. It's when you're at one company, as in any role, even as a CEO, you're pretty much, you're very focused on your business, your competitors, your pipeline. Whereas being on all these different boards, I get a much broader view, and have able to influence a lot of different aspects of ophthalmology. And it just keeps it so fascinating and interesting. And I did mention sort of, relationships in ophthalmology. And that's been something that I've loved too. I'm friends with people that I knew, back in graduate school, in my early days of Alcon. And that's something that is still a thrill and keeps me passionate about what's going on in ophthalmology.
It's funny. I've made this comment before, but when Infocus launched, and we're not the first ophthalmic focused venture fund, but as we were raising money for our first fund, one of the pushback comments was, "It's too narrow. Ophthalmology is too narrow." And then you try and explain to people what ophthalmology business really looks like, and how much entrepreneurship and development, and how much industry there is surrounding ophthalmology. It's pretty insane. It's incredible that you've been involved in so many aspects of it. You've even been involved at the investor level. I know that your work at Foundation Fighting Blindness, was somewhat of an investor level sort of activity, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that is really, really exciting. So I'm on the board of Foundation Fighting Blindness, and I'm also on the board of the venture fund that they started. Ben Yerkes, actually the CEO for the past few years, started it when he joined FFB. It's called the RD Fund, the Retinal Degeneration Fund, and it's a venture philanthropy fund. But we invest along with the key people like you in ophthalmology. And we invest in early stage, either close to clinical stage or clinical stage companies who are studying therapeutics for inherited retinal disorders. And it has been, I can see why you love doing it, because it's been really fascinating. We have a cool board that includes people like Jean Dewan, Tony Adamus, Kelly Liesbach, and others. I've learned so much, from them. And we actually, in just a couple of years, we've already had a return on investment. We invested in Videre, which is an optogenetics play, and Novartis. It's a preclinical asset that Novartis acquired, and that was pretty thrilling to be our first return. So
that's great.
Yeah,
it's great. We
love it.
And it's a right. So it's the beauty of that side of it is not only to get to know what's going on in the world of revenue generating ophthalmology, but you also see what's hopefully going to be up and coming one day, and have input into what eventually may become important therapy for people with significant ophthalmic disease. And knowing that that's occurring, at least for us at Infocus, we believe that a lot of what we do is mandatory, because these therapies that we invest in, we believe, need to succeed. We're going to make things better for patients, and it's our responsibility as clinicians and people who are involved in ophthalmology to make sure those things happen. And it's great to see one like you've already had, get funded, developed, and get acquired, and hopefully end up coming out into the world as something that benefits people. It's pretty fascinating, very gratifying phenomenon. So you've now had the ability to see what it's like to maybe build those assets in-house or move them up through the chains at the corporate level. But now you've also seen what it takes to get it to that point, right? Before Alcon or Santen or Allergan or anybody's going to buy something, right? There's a whole chain of events that has to occur before that can take years and lots of money. And that's where, the RD fund comes in, and we come in and Visionary and Excite and all of us, come in at that point and try and make these things succeed. So it's fascinating perspective.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. We also the RD fund, we started our own company with Gene Bennett as a scientific co-founder, and Ben Yerksa and his team as initially getting the company started. We now have a chief scientific officer as well, and we have a number of gene therapy assets that Gene Bennett has brought to the table. That some of them are ultra rare and probably conditions that other companies might not want to touch because of the market size. So it's a really exciting undertaking.
Yeah, where Infocus is planning for that and fund too. So building out companies, when you put together the right people and you have enough, money behind you, and you understand assets, especially on the pharma side or even on the device side, you can do that. You can build companies, and sometimes that's even more. It's like raising your own child, right? Yeah. Now we just adopt children and propagate them. You can actually birth your own child and raise it if you want, which is sort of exciting too. There's so much, and that's what I mean. It's ophthalmology is just a fantastic place to be involved and to invest, because there's just an incredible amount going on and so many great people. And you're right. I think that there's a unique collegiality inside of ophthalmology that allows people to work together for the common good. And I don't have a lot of experience investing outside of ophthalmology at all, but I've been told by people who do that this is a unique space.
Yeah. No, I think it really is. And from my earliest days, I really saw the generosity of spirit of people in the ophthalmology world. And when I first joined Alcon, I saw that glaucoma was the biggest market in ophthalmology. And for Alcon at that time, I didn't know anything about glaucoma, although I knew the neural pathways. And I actually, this was before the internet, so I couldn't Google glaucoma. And I was damned if I was going to go to the library. So I had the marketing folks draw up a list of the top glaucoma people in the U.S. And again, no internet, no email. I cold called these glaucoma KOLs. I was a nobody. And believe it or not, just about everybody returned my calls and invited me to visit them. I learned so much from them, and they're, dear friends to this very day. And that it amazed me that, first of all, that they would have that kind of interest and, extend those invitations to me. And also I saw how committed you are to your patients. And it was, just from the very beginning, I fell in love with that other aspect of the ophthalmology world, the ophthalmologists.
Yeah, it's funny, I had the privilege of speaking a few months ago with Jeanette Bankus, who you probably know from your days at Alcon.
Wonderful.
Right. So, and I think the theme of both of those conversations from the both of you, and again, two unbelievably influential women in the world of ophthalmology, is that you're not going to be successful unless you actually really care about it. You really have to care about what you're doing, especially when it comes to anything involved with caring for people.
Completely agree.
You have to, right? And that was, she made the same point, is that if you're not really invested in making people better, if you think this is just a financial play, or if it's, just a job where you have to, sort of succeed at a task, it's not going to work. You're never going to get to the level. And I think that comes across when you speak to people who have gotten, to the higher levels of industry, as you have, that you've got to care in this space, because if you don't, the people who you work with, and again, this may not just be unique to ophthalmology, but it's certainly prevalent in ophthalmology. We really, really care about trying to make these patients better. It isn't just about providing return. We want to do that for our investors. You want to make sure that you do that for your investors as well. But you have to be able to do it in a way that actually benefits people in a meaningful way. And if you don't care about that, it's probably not the right place for you to be.
Well, it's and that kind of passion really came through to me, since the early part of my career, and it really sustains me. I mean, it just keeps me passionate, and I'm also really impressed with scientists in our field that.
Yes.
Look how long people like Gene Bennett, look how long they worked on gene therapies, and all the obstacles in their way, and even gene therapy deaths, and they kept on, and that kind of dogged determination for the good of patients is tremendously impressive, and it does keep me passionate.
Give us 2 minutes on what's going on at Iberic. I think, as we get, close to winding down, I think it's important to talk about that. You're intimately involved with Iberic, and I think they've got some pretty exciting stuff going on. So I know you're involved with so many companies, but because that one's sort of at the forefront of retinal investment right now, what can you tell us?
Really exciting times at Iberic. Exciting for me. It's the first time I've been chairman of a board, and Iberic has just an amazing team, starting at the top, with the CEO, Glenn Splendorio. He's amazing. Praveen Dougal's part of our team now. He's actually president of.
Right. He just came on board, right? So he just came on board as president.
He came on board 2 years ago. He's been, and this past year was promoted to president because he. Praveen, we know how brilliant he is, but he's also an incredibly strategic thinker and team player in Iberic, and has helped build a team. We've added a number of really top people just within the past few months, even because we're getting ready for a possible commercialization. We, as you know, our lead program, Zimura, which is a complement inhibitor, C5, and for geographic atrophy and dry AMD, we're getting close to finishing our second phase 3 study. That is, our first phase 3 was GATHER1, and very positive results, met primary endpoints. Just a tremendous effect, of 27% reduction, I think, in GA over a 12-month period. We're now with the second phase 3, got completely enrolled over the summer, which was amazing for an international huge study during the time of pandemic, but it's gone extremely well. We should have a readout second half of this year. We're just really excited about it. Really the possibility to be first with the treatment for GA. So tremendous need, and we're just really, really excited and have built a tremendous team to get ready for possible commercialization.
It's crazy. It's great. It's exciting for everybody. We're happy to hear that there's progress in geographic atrophy. That's been, sort of the holy grail for investment in ophthalmology for a long time. And we're starting to see lots of companies have some progress there. And it's great to see that your first chairmanship will turn into something positive, although it's going to set the bar pretty high for you. So you better be careful. People ask you to come on boards, they're going to expect you to commercialize their asset. So just be careful about how successful Iberic becomes. People start asking questions. That
would be a wonderful outcome to me.
Yeah, horrible problem to have. Horrible problem. Listen, I think that you could probably spend 1,000 more hours talking about all the companies, and we didn't even get to the foundational work that you've done and all the things you've done in a philanthropic way for patients. There's just a million things going on in your world, and I think on behalf of all of us who are out here in ophthalmology, both from my perspective as a clinician and also as an investor at this point, we all want to thank you for everything you've done to help advance the treatment of ophthalmic disease. And I know that you will continue to experience loads of success as you move forward. And I personally am looking forward to working closely with you. I'm looking forward to seeing you at New Horizons in February in San Francisco. Hopefully people will be out for your Glaucoma 360, which is your co-founding foundational and educational entity. Happy to be a part of that and looking forward to seeing you there. And again, just thank you for everything you've done and wishing you continued great success going forward. And really appreciate you taking 45 minutes out of your time to sit with us today.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and a shout out to OIS in general too. OIS has been a tremendous inspiration to me, and it was part of the inspiration for starting Glaucoma 360. So, and I'll see you there, Rob, and hopefully a lot of other folks there too.
Yep. So thanks everybody for taking the time to listen today. And thanks again, OIS, for giving us the opportunity to have these conversations. Looking forward to seeing everybody on the next podcast.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for listening, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the OIS podcast. Be sure to listen in next week as we discuss the latest innovations in ophthalmology with experts in science, medicine, and industry. Subscribe to our iTunes channel so you don't miss a thing. Got a story of your own to tell? Apply to be a guest at OIS.net.